Welcome everyone to our webinar today. The future of healthcare is all about access. Here's what providers can do to prepare. I'm Emily Rapley with Becker's Hospital Review. We will begin today's webinar with the presentation and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit questions throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. We look forward to hearing your questions. Please note that today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. To access the recording, simply use the same link you used to log into the webinar today. At this time, it is now my pleasure to start today's webinar by introducing our presenters. Here with us today is Bill Siniford, the Senior Vice President of Buxton. In his role as Senior Vice President, Bill oversees the company's new sales and marketing teams. He is responsible for guiding Buxton's marketing and sales strategies and collaborating with other division leaders on corporate initiatives. Additionally, Bill leads Buxton's healthcare division, the company's largest vertical, to help healthcare providers apply Buxton's analytics and technology to their biggest challenges. Bill has been a featured speaker at a number of retail, restaurant, and healthcare industry events, including the International Council of Shopping Centers annual meeting, the Society for Healthcare and Strategy Market Development, and the International Franchise Association's annual conferences. He was honored as a recipient of the Fort Worth Business Press's 40 Under 40 Award, which is given to the top rising executives in the community. Bill received his bachelor's degree from Texas A&M University and sits on the board of directors for the Texas A&M Center for Retailing Studies. Joining Bill today is Nikki Viner, a vice president in the healthcare division at Buxton. Nikki joined Buxton from Mercy, a health system based in St. Louis, where she was vice president of marketing operations and technology. In that role, she led marketing operations and technology for Mercy's 4-state service area, supporting 32 hospitals, 300 outpatient facilities, and more than 2,000 integrated physicians. She also oversaw consumer analytics and research efforts to support targeted, measurable marketing priorities. Nikki previously served as Mercy's Vice President of Market Development. Additionally, she worked for the FedEx office in new store development, leading strategy, site selection, and construction efforts for the Western United States, opening 245 new stores in 2 years. Nikki has an undergraduate degree in accounting business administration from Friends University in Wichita, Kansas. At this time, I'm pleased to turn the floor over to Bill to begin today's presentation.
Thank you very much. Really honored to be here today talking with you all about access and why it is so important and what some of the leading health systems and healthcare companies are doing to optimize that strategy to win in a very changing environment. You have an evolving consumer right now, and you have a very competitive marketplace. And so as people are having more choice in the way in which they engage in healthcare, in the way in which they learn about healthcare, that creates an opportunity, but also a risk if you're not paying attention to how that consumer is evolving and taking advantage of that. So we'll talk about that today and why that's really important in a very competitive environment. You have traditional health system players as competition, but you also have many private equity-backed businesses that are really trying to come in and eat at the profitable pieces of a health system's business, and they are employing very similar strategies to what we'll talk about today. So we will broach the subject of how you can engage in these strategies to really be efficient and effective in the ways you approach your market, not just to protect revenue streams that you need to pay for the unprofitable pieces of your business, but also the better with which you have a relationship with your patients as consumers, and not just treating them when they're sick, but creating a relationship with them to keep them healthy, enables you to really create great long-term health outcomes for the populations in your market. So those are the things that we'll talk about today. Buxton, this is not a commercial on us, but just to put some frame of context, we are a consumer intelligence company that's been around for over 25 years, helping all types of businesses understand their consumers and how they're evolving and utilize that insight into helping optimize people's site selection strategies, marketing strategies, operational strategies, investment strategies, and merchandising or service line optimization strategies. And many of those things are very important in what we'll talk about today and where healthcare is evolving. So just actually, you've heard the introductions on us, but Nikki, if you want to kind of talk about briefly your experiences in this, and this is not just me talking, this is someone who's sort of lived these types of things.
Absolutely, thank you. So while at Mercy, so my 10-year experience, we were actually partners with Buxton in developing our overall strategy for growth, specifically starting with on the primary care side. We actually, 10 years ago, created a community master plan for each one of the communities that we served, where we had a 5-year roadmap for growth and good partnership. And I think today, part of what I want to share is what we learned, what worked, within our health system, what I would have changed if I could do it over again, sort of those lessons learned. In addition, our relationship with Buxton evolved over time, and they supported us from a marketing standpoint as well, targeting the right consumers at the right time.
So going over the sort of overview of what we'll accomplish today, we've touched on it a little bit, the purpose and components of a strong access strategy, what that opportunity provides, and frankly, what the risk is in not adopting a strong access strategy. Lessons that you can learn from the retail industry. So again, some good, some bad, but that can fuel helping you win in an evolving environment that has significant competition. The challenges of that access strategy or evolving that access strategy within the constructs of your existing organization, and some tips that Nikki can provide on that, and the role of analytics in solving that challenge. So at a high level, those are the things that you will get out of today's session.
So really, what is the purpose of an access strategy, right? It is the opportunity to figure out how to serve our patients and potential patients and how they want to be served, where they want to be served, and when. With the consumerization of healthcare, expectations are different. And as healthcare continues to evolve from fee-for-service to value, it's more about keeping our patients and consumers well. So it's being where they are versus, back in the old days of healthcare, where everything revolved around that hospital campus. So the access strategy really is how do we use data, how do we use analytics to be able to support what that strategy is to be there when a consumer needs us. So some of the components, these are sort of what we used in my background, some proposed parts of an access strategy. First and foremost, though, any access strategy has to be developed in collaboration with the strategy folks, operations, senior leadership, finance for funding, those kinds of things. But really, it's that structure of what do you want to build? What are those facility types? We actually had multiple sizes of primary care based upon the market and what the data suggested. And understanding that and when to play those specific facilities. The next thing is, what are those trade areas that we want to serve in? What is the right location for the facility, and how do we minimize cannibalization of our existing facilities? What are those capital requirements? Again, gets back to location, rent or purchase, gets back to the building and what size and all of that. And then prioritization, where do you start? That is always a challenge in the communities that we serve. It's what is our priority, and how do we use a combination of data and your local market knowledge of where to start the growth. And then some of what we'll talk about today is the data to support all of that. So why does an access strategy matter? it's meeting a consumer's expectations. They now feel the retail impact of healthcare. They want choice. They want convenience. And it's a whole different mindset. And how do we, as a health system, move closer to them to provide ease of access and a less expensive option for them for access to healthcare? How do we can also build those better relationships. It's about getting them in the door and keeping them in the door. Some of the things we worked on was how do you get new primary care patients? How do you convert, if you had a young female, how do you convert her to our OBGYN? When she marries and decides to have a family, how do we make sure she used our birthing suites, right? So that journey of healthcare, really does begin with the front door of a single location.
Well, it's interesting to think about today, too, because if you don't capture her in that example, and there's obviously all kinds of additional examples, then you're not going to, it's going to be much harder to get that downstream opportunity to serve that person, too.
Absolutely. And the next point about competition, right? If you think about primary care or urgent care, there are 400 to 500 locations across the U.S. opening every year for more of a retail concept. That's the quick thing to pick up. So how do we, as a health system, do that and go after that potential customer and retain the ones we already have? And then it comes down to the financials as well. How do you build market share? How do we make sure that we get people in the front door so that we do get the downstream revenue, into our hospital-based services when they have that need? So really, it's about creating a strategy or a roadmap to enable us to compete.
And I think one of the things that we'll talk about today that helps in that is the adoption of analytics and how that can help you identify where those opportunities are and what is the forecast of potential, so that when you're making, in many cases, significant investments, that you're getting the return on investment. And I know sometimes in health systems, especially when you're nonprofit, sometimes that focus is, well, we're nonprofit, but if you're not making, air quotes, profit, then you don't have as much to pay for the things we have to, that are sort of unprofitable but a part of your mission or your service, right? And so those private equity-backed companies, you've got other types of businesses that are for-profit that don't have to serve all, and they can go after these high-margin service lines with great insurance and those types of things, and you're competing for all of that. And so it's not just spend money, it's how do I use my investments, my dollars, my time in the ways that are going to generate the greatest results that then fuel my mission.
And reinvestment.
Right.
Into the health system.
Right. And so as we make this transition, those private equity-backed healthcare companies that we're talking about, or even people like, what is CVS doing? What is, you think about Walgreens or Walmart even, and some of the extra services they're putting in there, and some of those initial access points where they're in every neighborhood across the country. What are those people doing? They're taking lessons. They either are retailers or they are taking lessons from the retail world. And while retail has its share of issues right now, there are a lot of things that the industry has done right over the years that helps them with consumers and quote-unquote access. And so some of the smart healthcare systems and healthcare companies are taking advantage of that. So sometimes when you talk about retail today, people are saying, well, online's killing retail. Look with the Amazon effect, and you've got all these retailers going out of business. Well, I think that's a bit of an overreaction to what's happening. There clearly are retailers that are going out of business, but why are they going out of business? That's really where we kind of dig into, and who are the ones that are still succeeding in this environment, because stores are still there. There's still many stores all across the country. They didn't go out of business because of online shopping. what happened to retailers, the ones that are doing well, is that they realized that they needed to have an integrated multi-channel business model. They needed to be where the consumers were in the ways in which the consumer wanted to interact with them, and they needed to have a consistent message and positioning wherever they met that consumer. So if you think about those types of things, you're understanding the consumer beyond just basic demographics. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. But you could have two people who are demographically the same, but one wants to engage in a store and one wants to engage online. So it's understanding all of those different types of things and applying that to your access strategy. So if you look at it, a couple of years ago, everyone said everything's going online. But in reality, you've got some significant online retailers that are opening up brick and mortar locations. Warby Parker being an example. There are many others. Why is that? Well, again, not everybody wants to buy online. Sometimes people want to interact in a location versus virtually. Sometimes they're just not willing to adopt that type of technology. It's also hard to let people know who you are or that you're there or what your brand positioning is when you're only on the web. Sometimes people don't realize, but in retail, and the same is true in outpatient healthcare, that sometimes your best marketing vehicle can be your location itself. If it's a nice location with good signage and good, it's a positive reinforcement, that person that's driving by that location to and from work or running their errands on the weekend, all that impression frequency is building up. And even if they go online, they've seen you in the marketplace in a convenient way. And that's what retail is really evolving to. It is not only going to go online. In fact, experts predict that online sales will peak at about 20%. And even with all the talk of going online sales as a percentage of total retail sales is still less than 12%. So it's going to be, how do we develop ways in which we can be there for the consumer in a way that makes them know I'm here, think about me, and know that they can come get you and get help from you in whatever ways that they need. And so if you think about it, the lesson really wasn't that everything's going online. Virtual is extremely important, and you need to be there, but that's one channel. And even going forward, that is still going to be just one channel. So how are you optimizing your real estate strategy? How are you optimizing your online strategy? How are you optimizing your marketing messages to speak not just to your overall patient, but to each of the different personas within your patient base in different ways, to the ways that are going to make the most impact to them? So really, multi-channel, and that success is really dictated in the retail world by having a balanced strategy for access or consumer acquisition. And understanding consumer preference. And the last thing I'll say on that is if you look at a lot of the retailers in this section that went out of business, you think about a Blockbuster, there were a lot of smart people at Blockbuster, but their consumer was evolving, the competitive mix was changing, and before they knew it, it was too late, right? So you have to continually understand your consumers and study them and see how they're changing and how do they want to be talked to, and weave in outside data on lifestyle characteristics and psychographics and consumption behaviors and activities. That all this data is available, but to understand them beyond just basic demographics, how do they want to interact with you? You need to understand that, and some retailers didn't understand that, and competitors were doing that better. And then also, many of them had made really bad investments. They were investing in the wrong places, they were investing in the wrong spots, and they had acquired so much debt or just misappropriated capital that they could never recover from that. And so other people could make those changes and could be more nimble. And so while that's a retail example, and we all can think of a number of retailers that have gone out of business that did those things, there are health systems that are doing the same things with where they invest capital in an unoptimized way. And how they're trying to market in an unoptimized way and not paying attention to how the consumer's evolving. And so while that's a risk, it's also an opportunity, because the ones that can figure that out are the ones that will win. Just like in retail, not everybody went out. There are winners and there were losers, but what do the ones that win have in common? And that's really kind of what we were talking about, and we'll show some of the specifics on that as we get into the nitty-gritty of how you do that, and that's really how do you evolve that into healthcare, right? And that's kind of what you guys did, Nikki.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the challenges we had with an access strategy, is coming together as an organization and creating that strategy. For us, using data was a relatively new concept, at that point in time. Healthcare had evolved using gut and sort of the attitude of if you build it, they will come. With everything Bill just mentioned about retail, what we talked about earlier, the consumer expectation is changing, and how do we come together to create the right strategy? So first up is where to build and what, right? And it's understanding the competitors. Where are they located? It's understanding what's the market demand. What's the payer mix in that community? Do you need an access strategy for the underserved? That's, obviously a different payer mix than, commercially insured. How do you use data to help inform that kind of decision-making on where to build or what to do with your existing assets? And we'll walk through some of that as well. It's about minimizing cannibalization. What's acceptable? Because in many cases, if you deploy new locations and you cannibalize an existing one, in many cases that can be okay. You'll actually gain. So just sort of making that decision and making sure that your operations folks understand that and what that is. And then really it's about prioritizing the effort for capital. And again, I think the way we did it, community by community, sort of they had a bucket of money and worked with them individually to create that strategy.
Well, and I think really quick, that's a very interesting thing that you said, is that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to a good access strategy. It is understanding what's the best strategy for each of your markets.
Yep.
But then also, even within those markets, the sub-markets, the different trade areas, not all locations are the same. So how do you use data and analytics to understand that on a trade area by trade area, service area by service area basis, on a market level basis, and deploy customized approaches to access to each of those?
Absolutely.
And so that's really, part of the role of analytics in solving that challenge. And so it begins with the customer or the consumer, whatever you want to say, but it's that, a patient, when you think about someone who's a patient, that's somebody that typically is sick or they need services from you. But the ones that are winning in access and kind of creating this long-range relationship, again, not just treating you when you get sick, but keeping you healthy, which is, as Nikki mentioned, as we're evolving from fee-for-service to value-based care, the ones that win are going to help create that relationship. Well, you have to understand patients beyond patient and beyond traditional demographic. You need to understand them as a customer or a consumer. So what does that mean? Well, that means when you want to first study who are you serving, at which facilities or online, for which services, and what do they look like? How far are they willing to travel to get to your locations if we're talking about actual physical locations and not virtual? But one of the things that we've noticed in a lot of our analyses, both for retail and healthcare, is that your virtual or your online penetration, if you will, is higher in areas that you also have a physical presence, because again, even though they're engaging with you online, the reinforcement of impression, of seeing your locations and seeing your signage and seeing your billboards and different things, helps create them to make them think of you when they do go online. So as we think about things, proximity to locations and proximity to your signage and the ways in which you position yourselves is important. But from a physical location, as you think about what retail does and what healthcare companies that are winning in outpatient ambulatory type environments, primary care, urgent care especially, it's first understanding how far are people willing to travel to get to your locations, and understanding that based on drive time, not mile rings. Right? People don't drive in miles, they drive in time. How long does it take me to get there? And the further away they are, the less likely they are to engage with you when we're talking about things like primary care and urgent care, that sort of initial access. Even for specialty, while the trade areas or the service areas are bigger, there's still a point where it's too far. And so even if there's a referral component, they start to seek out other options if they have to go too far. But especially primary care, urgent care, how far are people willing to drive or travel to get to that location? And then once you understand that, you can realistically assess your markets. And so as Nikki talked about, understanding things like cannibalization, it's very difficult to without unbiased data, it's very difficult to understand what is your true cannibalization. That typically becomes opinion. But if you can start to use data to understand how far are people willing to travel to get to your locations, that helps you understand what your realistic service areas are by location, which helps you understand, again, where you don't really cover people with location service areas that you think that you do. But also, it helps you start to understand who are you getting within that service area versus who you're not for that particular service, primary care, with urgent care. And so really what you can do is weave in your data on the patient, that's protected obviously, but with all of the outside data that's available. So if you think about it, we leave paper trails as consumers every day. Whether we sign up to read an article on a website, or we have a grocery Super Saver card, or we have a mortgage, or we took a survey, or we have magazine subscriptions, or we made a political or a charitable contribution. So much of that is rolled up and sold to big data aggregators. And that stuff is out there that can be utilized to help inform your access strategy. And in fact, it's essential to do that in some form or fashion, but to combine who you're getting with all of that data to see what are the attributes that they share. What do they look like? How do they see the world? How do they live their lives? And you're going to have different types of groups of patients or consumers. But understanding what each of them looks like. Where are other people that look just like them, but you're not serving right now? Where are they at a household level? How might I talk to them? What messages might be important based on how they see the world and where they are in their life stage and how they like to engage with marketing messages? Or should I talk to them about virtual versus coming in to see me? All of those things can be ascertained through data and analytics. As an example, you can have these two households that are demographically the same. And, let's say, they're both, as you can see on here, demographically they're the same, roughly the same age, the same income, the same marital status, on down the line. Demographically, you'd say, okay, both of these people are the same. But as you start to put some color to it, you can see based on lifestyles that these people are very different. One could be very active, one could be very sedentary. It means one person needs an orthopedic surgeon, the other person needs a cardiologist based on inactivity. But if I'm looking at them demographically, I think they're both the same. And that's how you're not as efficient or effective as you need to be. That's how mistakes can happen in site selection. That's how you can waste money and marketing dollars by not being as effective as possible. So the kinds of data that we're looking for, what are we trying to find more of? And obviously, from an access strategy, you're going to have a primary care strategy. You're going to have an urgent care strategy. Within each of those, there's going to be different types of people that engage with you. They might be a little bit different. So how do we create sub-profiles? How do we then develop strategies of access to go get more of those people and put locations around a lot of those people that I don't have coverage right now?
It's understanding the difference between where you place a pediatrician versus an internal medicine doctor, right? So how, use the data at this level to inform that.
Right. So once you know the who, once you know that in this case of Steve, and people like Steve are who you're looking, that's your the type of patient that you want to find more of. Once you know the characteristics and the explanation of what they look like, then you can go find where are all the other Steves in any service area in any of your markets, right? So where you find a high concentration of these people allows you to understand there's opportunity there. And then also understanding how these people, your penetration within these within these types of people decay the further away they are from a location. So this is really important as well. So if you think about it, this Steve type person, this type of consumer segment, let's say that's a really great urgent care consumer for you, that type of person. And I've just shown you in that neighborhood slide where we can show you, here's all the other households that look like Steve. But what this is also showing is when you're analyzing your data with outside data to really start to understand the attributes of the people you want to find more of, what you also want to look at is how does your penetration decay with those types of people the further away they are from your access point. So if Nikki's household and my household were very similar, not just demographically, but how we live our lives, how we behave as consumers of healthcare, all those types of things, but Nikki lives 3 minutes away and I live 12, Nikki as a potential patient/consumer is much more likely to utilize a location if it was sort of over here on the left-hand side of the screen than I am, even though we may both be in the trade area. Nikki's driving by her location to and from work every day. When she's running her errands on the weekend, she's driving by. So when that infrequent need happens and she needs urgent care, she says, oh yeah, there's a urgent care X right here by my house. I'm in your trade area as well, but I never drive by there. And in fact, there's 5 other competitors that are closer to me, and I'm thinking convenience at that point. Primary care is a little bit different, right? But if I know that you're there, I might think about you. I might, especially if I'm new to the area and I'm looking for these types of things, if you're convenient to them, it's not just that it's easy for them to transact with you, for lack of a better term, on an ongoing basis, but that they found you in the first place. And in this fight for access with all of these competitors, that's really important. So you can see how different types of people for the same service line decay at different rates. But the point is, as you get out to the edges of the trade area, everybody's going to have a very low expected value to you, even your best types of potential patients. And so it's looking at things in a 3-dimensional way, not a 2-dimensional way. If I'm marketing to best potential consumers in an area for primary care or urgent care, even though this Steve type guy is my best type of guy, after, say, 6-7 minutes, this would be based on your data. This isn't making it up. It's what do the algorithms show as you process all of this. It's to say that, if I get out to 9 minutes, I don't want to market to Steve anymore because they're really not much better than marketing to my worst. In fact, my dollars are best spent talking to these types of people close in with the right message, with the right marketing vehicle. So that's really key. But also think about it from a site selection standpoint, an access strategy from a physical location standpoint. So Nikki mentioned cannibalization. If you have a location that's to the left of Steve here, and then you're thinking about putting another location, on the very far right of the screen. So if you drew a service area, a drive time service area around that new location on the right-hand side of the screen, that might be a significant overlap to the existing location's service area. And some of the people in the room might say, you can't do that. That's too close. You're overlapping like 30% of the households in this person's service area. You may be overlapping 30% of the households, but you're really only potentially cannibalizing like 2% of the patients, because your penetration out here on the far edges of the service area is very low to begin with. The data is showing you that. It's unbiased. It's factual data. And in fact, by putting another location here, we know these types of people are much more likely to engage with you, and their value is much higher to you when they're close in. So their value increases. You understand that. The fact of the matter is, if you don't take that location, a competitor will, and they're going to take a large percentage of these people as well. So understanding your patients as consumers, now that's not the only thing, as we'll get to here in a second. But understanding your patients as consumers, understanding where everyone else is that looks just like them, and understanding how their expected usage of you or your penetration decays the further away they get, is the foundation to building forecasting solutions that allow you to to have a strong access strategy. It is also understanding what are those other things that your best primary care locations in different types of markets have in common. They typically will have high concentrations of the right types of people, but what's the utilization data? What's the insurance mix? What's the retail data? What's the area drop factors? How's the population growing or shrinking? Crime statistics, transportation data. There's thousands of things out there to test to see which bits and pieces, along with a high concentration of the right types of people, explain successful location performance. And when you have that, you know this is what I'm looking for, and then you can go find where are all the other areas represented in this screen by these sort of green trade areas, where are my best intersections in the service areas around them that would be additional great urgent care locations or additional great primary care locations? Or could I put multiple specialties within a practice based on understanding these types of things by what's been successful for you, right, going forward? And then taking those kind of analytics and putting that into your access strategy.
So now comes we've got the data, and now it's actually developing that strategy. And the best place to start on developing any strategy is actually assessing what you have today. You can't develop a growth strategy without understanding, do I have opportunities to grow what I have, or relocate, or potentially close existing locations. This is a 2x2 matrix that actually has your actual performance on the y-axis and a forecast on the x-axis. And really what you want to understand is how is that location performing against the forecast. Top right is high forecast, high actuals, performing really well. What can we learn from those locations, and how can we replicate that elsewhere? Why are they, and how do we maintain that sort of high performance? The bottom right, high forecast, low actual visits. So why do we have low actual visits? Is it bad location? Is it an operational issue?
And when you say bad location, so we're clear, it's not clearly what this is saying is the forecasting model that's been built that we just discussed, the consumer profiles, all the other data, what are the things that are important. That went and found where are your great new locations that you don't have coverage right now, but also evaluating the existing portfolio. And so in this case, this one out here on the bottom right, that what the forecast solutions are saying is this site should be doing better because it looks like these other guys, but it's not. Why? So what the analytics are saying is the intersection and the things going on in that service area around the intersection of where that location is good. It has the dynamics that when you typically have that, you do better, but it's not performing that way. Why? So when Nikki says bad location, does that mean it's a nasty building or it's run down or it's behind something else that nobody can see it from the street and all your other locations are much more visible? That's a qualitative aspect of the site. It's not, it's in the wrong area. Or that trade area has changed, or that service area has changed over time.
Correct. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, absolutely. It is, things shift, as co-tenants move in and out and things like that. So it could be many of those things. On the bottom left, those are those locations that have a low forecast and low actuals, and those are the hard ones. Those are the ones you have to make a decision on. Is it on? These scores are based upon an average. Is it a trade area that's a little more rural, and is it okay that it's low compared to some of your other locations that may be in a higher density area? Or is it just everything has shifted over the last 20 years, and should we relocate or should we close that location? But again, it's using data to really guide that discussion and those decisions.
One of the things that's always kind of funny is whenever if you're all sitting around the room, the horizontal line here, and this crossbar of the 2x2 is arbitrarily set at sort of average volume for that service line and that type of population density. So you know the horizontal piece of the axis, but you don't really know the vertical. What should it be doing? And that's what analytics can provide. And so from the horizontal standpoint, let's say you have a new CFO, and she comes in and says, why do we have these lower than average performing units? And you typically get people in the room pointing fingers at each other. Whoever picked the location blames the physicians or the operations within the location. The physicians and the operations people blame whoever picked the site. And then eventually everyone gets around to blaming marketing. It's always marketing's fault. But as Nikki's saying, in reality, some of these, let's look at unbiased data, not to be a silver bullet, but to be a significant piece of the decision-making process to sort of, what I like to say, unlock the logjam of opinion. You know what, guys? We can remodel this location. We can change out the front office people. We can dump a bunch of marketing in here, but that's not going to yield anything. We're going to be wasting dollars. Over here, let's not get out of this specific area. Maybe we move across the street where it's a nicer facility, but we don't want to move out of here and give it up for the competition. We are using these types of solutions to help develop insights to improve the performance of your existing portfolio, as well as find new and optimize your access within each of those.
Absolutely, and sort of that unbiased data element. One of the other things we had done in the most recent iteration of using this 2x2 to assess our existing was then also looking at prior year actuals. Has this location been on a decline for the last several years, right? So that adds some weight to the forecast and where we were at as well. But really important piece of the access strategy. And really, then it's about taking the data, understanding what you're going to do with your existing, and trying to determine the right location by the right facility type, the right size, and prioritize those for the greatest opportunity.
The right service line mix within each of those facilities.
Yeah, and it's really, and I think one of the challenges I experienced was it's let's make decisions based upon data, not based upon emotion or gut or those kinds of things. And it's a combo of the data and your local market knowledge that really helps develop the overall strategy. The data may suggest a trade area, an intersection that scores really high, but it's directly in a competitor's market, and are you ready to go head to head, right? So that may not be your number one.
And the forecasting solution would say it's factored in the competition hit, and it still would be good, but there are other concerns that you need to think about in that decision.
Absolutely.
Right.
So just as a reminder then, kind of the components of the proposed components of an access strategy is, now that whole facility type, the proposed location, the size, so understanding the capital requirements, the prioritization, now, sort of marrying back to the data and the consumer analytics that how to sort of pull all of that together to take to leadership, to take to your board of directors, to take to finance for the overall approval of that access strategy. So, and then the fun begins with actually implementing the strategy. And some of what I'm going to share is a little bit of what we learned at my healthcare organization, but also what I learned in retail at FedEx and at Yum Brands prior to that. So, utilize those priority trade areas for the real estate search. And recommendation is you work multiple trade areas at the same time. Because what you want to do is find the right real estate. Find the location that has great access, that has parking, to Bill's earlier point about the visibility and the signage, sort of that branding opportunity for the knowledge. I think in many cases in healthcare, we go with what's available. And that may not be the best investment decision.
Or many times people will say, well, we have real estate partners, brokerage partners, and they do that for us. And while those firms provide a valuable service, they also are being compensated based on the transaction. So they are motivated, not that they're not your partner, but they are also motivated to have you be in a location. It might not be the best spot for you, or it may be, hey, we need to pause here and not go in here. So how do you let the analytics create that inventory of top potential opportunities, which then gives you choice and allows you to be proactive in a strategic way in implementing the strategy, and then use their expertise to say, I want to be here, 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 and here. Find me the real estate that makes sense for what I need based on the economics that I want, as close to that intersection as possible. And it's the best marriage of those two great services for you to help you achieve your access strategy in the most area, or getting you the most return on investment.
Absolutely, and it's hard. When you've got in the growth mentality, right, and that's why you play multiple trade areas at the same time. And one of the first things I learned when I moved into retail real estate was the lesson they gave me was don't fall in love with a site unless you have data to support it as well. So super important, and cannot underestimate the importance. If you've got the marriage of the data, your local market knowledge, all of that makes the right site selection. And then really then it's about measuring the performance and ramp up, and how quickly can you get that location up to speed. And then, one of the other important components, and Bill mentioned that, it's the can be blamed, right? But the marketing support is also key. And one of the things that we used was sort of understanding that core customer, that Bill walked us through. That can apply very nicely on the marketing side as well. Identifying who to actually target. Where are the Steves, in that trade area to support that new facility?
Yeah, and I think it's also important, your experience with your system and then others is, even if they're doing their own, even if marketing is doing their own great things, it is the 2x2 and helping create the baseline of what should our strategies be to improve the performance of our existing facilities. That's important to give marketing power in the data too, to say, I know you guys are banging on us to do a big campaign here, but the data says that's not the opportunity here. It's this. And when you get to that and everybody's working off of the analytics and the shared strategy amongst departments, you're breaking down the silos, you're breaking down the logjam of opinion, and you're allowed to then really go forward with confidence in the strategy.
Absolutely.
So, as a conclusion, we're pretty much done here. We'll be able to take some questions, but I think that what we really wanted to do was to highlight, where we see access strategy evolving to. It's a tremendous opportunity, again, with an evolving consumer wanting to interact with you in multiple ways and having significant options to choose from as you've got new competitive players in the space, traditional healthcare players in the space operating more efficiently or with some of these strategies. In this evolving consumer environment, in a very competitive world, how are you going to compete for the access? Because again, when you can do this optimally, and that's multi-channel, right? It's not just real estate. It is also online, but it's understanding which types of consumers want to interact with you online versus just in brick and mortar versus both. How do you talk to them? How do you be there when you need them? Allows you to create a relationship with them that makes them want to choose you over others, that makes them want to, if you're executing once you have them, to create that cradle-to-grave type relationship with them, so the downstream services that can come from that you're getting, not someone else, and the opportunity to positively affect the long-term health outcomes of the people in your markets. This is really a strong way to do it, by applying analytics to an access strategy, understanding consumers to help you be more efficient with your investment decisions, maximize return on investment, mitigate risk, and utilize that that savings, that profit, whatever you will, to continue to channel into fulfilling your mission or your goals as an organization. So we very much appreciate your time today, and we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Bill and Nikki, for that fantastic presentation. With that, we will now begin our question and answer session. As a reminder to our audience, if you have any questions for Bill or Nikki, please submit them by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your dashboard. And we will try to get through as many questions as we have time for today. So it looks like we've already got a few questions coming in here. I'd like to start with this first one about challenges. So the question is, what's the greatest challenge to implementing the type of analytics that you've been talking about, and how can we navigate that?
I'll take that one. I think initially it is, one, is sort of getting the buy-in that data should drive our decision-making process. And really it's about finding the champion within your organization who will support and help lead that effort. And the value of the analytics we talked about is a combination of your data and the third-party data, and sometimes that challenges getting your data. But that's a really important piece, to have the high value of the analytics to drive your strategy.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nikki. So this next question here is about who is using virtual health and telehealth. So this audience member wants to know if the analytics can show who is more likely to utilize virtual or telehealth, and do you have data showing this type of utilization in markets?
Yes, that's a great question. That's one of the reasons that you want to analyze your patients, not just at an overall level, but by service line, by population density, by market type, and then even understand that by channel, right? And so just taking a subset, who are the people that engage with you virtually, that don't engage with you in brick and mortar? What does that profile look like? And then where's everybody else that looks like that? And when I talk to those people, I want to have a virtual health type message. What's interesting is that you'll see when you analyze that, there's really three buckets. Who engages with you just virtually? Who engages with you really just brick and mortar? And then who engages with you both? And that's an emerging area. It's getting bigger by the day. So what is your marketing message to those types? How do those people differ from the ones that engage with you only virtually? Right? What are the differences in their DNA, if you will, based on the data that we're talking about, the lifestyle data, the marketing data, those types of things? But how do I develop then campaigns if I'm going to talk to somebody that's an omni-channel or a multi-channel type patient? How would I develop my strategy there? And if I know who that is versus the other, I can understand that. And then frankly, who just only is coming to my locations, I would have a different approach. So you can do that. And definitely if you don't have virtual care data right now, but you're looking to look into that, we definitely have, and there's data out there that can help you understand people that are much more likely to utilize that, even if you don't have any of that data to study. So that certainly can be something that can help you begin to start that strategy.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification, Bill. So for all the audience members out there in competitive markets, I think this is a great question, and that is, how best should we adjust our strategy if located in a highly saturated and competitive market? What would you recommend?
Well, that is a great question, and I think I'd like Nikki's perspective on this too, because some of your markets were very competitive, right, that you were in. But I think especially in highly saturated markets, this is important to understand people and to understand your service areas on a very micro level, and to not take a one-size-fits-all approach. To take a local neighborhood type approach of who's in this service area, what do they look like, how can I treat them, and create strategies for those location by location. Now, you can't have, if you have 100 locations, you can't have 100 individual strategies. But what you'll find is that as you roll that up, there's probably 3 or 4 different types of success strategy that can work depending on what's going on in those locations. And it's applying what's the best which of those 4 strategies is the best strategy, which is what the marketing and real estate strategy for each of those types, and coding all of your locations with that, and then executing and measuring on that. But if it's saturated, there's still an opportunity for switch, right? And so if the question is, how do we make people switch? Again, the way you do that, it's tough, right? If somebody's got a great relationship with primary care doctor that they've had for 30 years, I'm not going to lie to you, that's tough. But there's a lot of people that are not necessarily happy with their primary care provider, or they don't really have a relationship. It's just someone they go see once a year when they need their prescription filled and they need to get some blood work done or whatever. Or they don't go in there, really, but they're on the rolls. So the better you can be visible to them, be accessible to them, to talk to them in a way that is what they're interested in or how they see the world, the better you have a chance of converting people away from other providers. And especially as the consumer continues to evolve and understand they have choice, what is the best choice?
And we definitely had communities that we served that were in that situation where highly competitive, well-established, both us and our competitors. And really, it came down to following what we just shared, right? Understanding your existing facilities. Are they still in the right location? Is our competitor there? And really, everything has shifted out, right? So let us make that right decision and go where the growth is. That data can honestly help assess those situations and then determine where can you fill in.
Yeah, and even if you think about it from the analytics to in a competitive situation, you have to be aggressive in some of those investments to understand. Hey, I don't want to. There's 30,000 people demographically that I should be. The demographics, the general demographics say I should talk to in this location service area for urgent care, let's say. But gosh, if you could use the analytics and really refine that down to, these are actually the best 3,000 that I should talk to based on finding who I want to replicate that is close to me. Well, now think about that. I can market to the best 3,000 10 times for the same cost as marketing to all 30,000 once. And it is in that impression frequency when I'm getting the right marketing from you and I'm driving by your location and all of a sudden it just pops. So when you can be efficient with how you spend dollars, and that can be in real estate too. If you're putting a bunch of money into real estate in the wrong areas or okay areas and not great areas, you're not maximizing the return on investment that can then fuel your investments into access against your competition.
And it's about tying it all together. And
right.
To Bill's comment about going head to head, it's, do you have the right location with the right access visibility? Is your branding on point? Is your online presence on point, right? It's tying all of that together as a brand, using the analytics to support that.
Fantastic. We have just a minute left here, and it looks like we have just one more question. So if a system is just getting started with defining their access strategy, where do you recommend that they start? And if you can touch on which departments typically spearhead these kind of initiatives as well, that would be great.
Sure. I think where do you start is the combo of deciding, right, that it's time, we need to do something. And it's your strategy folks obviously need to be a big piece of that effort. You have to get operations support, whether that be COO, in the local community or, system-wide. Finance obviously has to be a big piece of that. And the analytics, to help drive that strategy. And then it's determining, is our strategy really about primary care? Is it about creating that long-term relationship? Or is our strategy, you know what, we want the retail view, and you know, it's about sort of that immediate access, responding to when they need to? Or is it a combination, right? So I think it's each individual system has to kind of make that decision of where they want to start, but ultimately it comes down to, you know, we have to listen to our consumers and our patients. And you know, what do they want and what do they expect? And how do we make it easy for them to choose us in those communities that we serve?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Bill and Nikki, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience today?
No, we just very much appreciate everyone's time, and if anybody has any questions, I know you guys are going to send out a link to this, and we're happy to answer any questions as well for anybody that wants to reach out to us via our website.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bill and Nikki. That was an excellent presentation, and thank you to Buxton for sponsoring today's webinar. To our audience, please enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars.